interesting text in Genesis chapter 2, verse 10 through 15, information about the location of the Garden of Eden. Is this information intended for us to find where the Garden of Eden is? Is it connected in terms of a whole Bible biblical theology? Very important question for us to ask as we look through this initial text. It's interesting that when it describes Eden, we have right off the bat a present participle. A river is flowing, maybe not reflected in the ESV translation there, but it is a participle flowing from Eden to water the garden, and from there it was divided and it became four heads. So we have this idea that a river is coming out and then dividing. If you go to the Yale Anchor Bible Dictionary, they have this picture, and it seems to me that that's what the Hebrew is suggesting, that you have these four rivers going out from one river that's in the garden. From there, it's divided into four heads. The name of the first river is the Pishon. We know virtually nothing about this other than the information that's given here. We're told that it's near the land of Havilah. You can see there is a textual variant. It says the Havilah, which is strange in Hebrew. You usually don't put the word the with proper names. This text does appear elsewhere, and where it appears elsewhere, it seems like whatever it's talking about is near the land of Israel. We're told that there's gold there. The gold of that land is good. There is bdellium there. Nobody really knows what that is. We're told that manna looks like bdellium. The onyx stone is there. That's interesting because the onyx stone is also connected with the temple, and so you begin to wonder if gold, bdellium, onyx is describing Eden in some kind of temple language, and it raises the question, is it connected with the future location of the temple? Notice as the descriptions are being given that the first description, the river that we know least about, the most information is given, and by the time we get to the end, the Euphrates, the assumption is, well, everyone knows where the Euphrates is. When we come to the second, we have this, the Gihon. The interesting thing about that word is the only other place that it appears in Scripture is in connection with Solomon being anointed king. David instructs his anointing to happen near the Gihon, and you wonder if that's suggesting some kind of Eden location with Jerusalem. It says that the Gihon is going all around the land of Cush, and it's interesting that if we look at the Septuagint there, and we can do the text comparison here with the Gihon. What's interesting is that the Septuagint, and the Vulgate too, but the Septuagint is interpreting that of Ethiopia, and you can see in the text there, Cush, normally in Hebrew, is connected with Ethiopia. We come to the Tigris, and the Tigris is situated in front of Assyria. These are all contemporary places. It doesn't seem, some people are suggesting, these are different rivers, different locations, but I've never heard anyone explain why they're describing these in terms of things contemporary with the first readers. And then when we get to the fourth river, we just have this word Euphrates. The assumption is we all know where it is. So we come to these six verses, and it seems like a lot of information is being given, and yet it's difficult when you come to a map to try to find a place that would meet all of these. I imagine the best suggestion, at least for me, the one that's been most insightful was John Sailhammer, who in his Pentateuch's narrative says that there's an obvious connection between the borders of the Promised Land and the location of Eden. Two of the four rivers are exactly the same, and perhaps three, if you include the Gihon, are connected. Critical scholars believe that the later description in both Zechariah and Ezekiel is presenting the river flowing out of Jerusalem, the eschatological river flowing out of Jerusalem, as an idealized Gihon river. It's interesting when we come to the Crossway ESV Study Bible Atlas. It's interesting that the editor puts the two common locations for Eden. And if you go to a map, this is nearly always where Eden will be suggested, where perhaps four rivers are coming together, or perhaps in the mountains of Ararat, where the Tigris and Euphrates are very close. I'm told that there are sources of the Tigris and Euphrates that are within 1,000 yards of each other in the highlands there. It's interesting that the Study Bible Atlas actually suggests an ancient Jewish connection, that possibly that Eden could be in Canaan. And it's interesting to me that while this suggestion is in the Study Bible Atlas, when that same map was put in the ESV Study Bible, they rejected that possibility. And I think it would be very interesting to be able to talk to the editors. I think this is probably John Currid. What went in, why that ancient suggestion was eliminated in the ESV Study Bible, but clearly it's the same map with just slight format changes. So what do we do with it? What do we do with the information? Well, one of the things that hardly ever comes up in this discussion is what biblical theology has to add to this conversation. Is there anything in the Bible in terms of biblical theology that would help us understand what this is suggesting? And as I've been working through this, I've wondered what we do with this statement of God's first interaction with Abraham. It says the Lord, YHWH, and here I'll put the English back up. The Lord said to Avram, Lake Lekah, go for yourself. And this, if we were Jewish, this would be part of the synagogue reading and would identify this section, go for yourself. This is called the Lake Lekah. From your land and from the family of your birth, from the house of your father, to the land I will show you. Now, the question I think we should ask, if Abraham is here and he's going to a land, is God really taking him away from Eden, or is he taking to a land I will show you? Is the land I will show you somehow connected to the land that Adam lost? Would you think, just in terms of literature, if you have a lost land, and think about the whole idea of land that's forfeited, or land that's taken by creditors, or gotten through ill-gotten gains, does God want to restore that land? Is God in the habit of giving the lost land back? And if that's true, would you think the land that I would show you would be connected to the lost land in Adam? It seems to me that that would be a fair reading in terms of just literature. It's interesting when we go to 15 and God begins to make promises. God talks about Abraham's seed being like the number of the stars. If someone's able to count, then so shall your seed, singular, be. So if God is giving Abraham a land, is it going to be a small land, or is it going to be a big land? Is it going to have few inhabitants or many inhabitants? And it would seem to me that the just the literary connection would be pretty massive in terms of if Abraham's going to have offspring like the seed of Abraham, offspring like the stars, that would be an enormous land, I would think. When we go through Genesis to 16, we see Abraham and Avram and Sarai trying to do this on their own. And clearly, at the end of that story, God is saying this is not the way. God doesn't need help. This is going to be supernatural offspring, and so it's not something that they should do. It's interesting that God changes Abraham's name. Perhaps the whole Leviticus, God calling to Moses saying, "Come to me," and the tabernacle, of course, is built to look like the Garden of Eden. There's gold, bdellium, onyx there. There are cherubs. It's a mysterious source of water and the immediate presence of God. And could it be that Leviticus is helping God's people see, well, to live with God in Eden, you have to receive a new heart. You have to be the kind of person who loves God. You have to have your sins forgiven. And so the land I will show you, could it be that the way to the Garden of Eden, the way past the cherubs who are excluding all those who are plagued with sin, that part of showing the way to the Garden of Eden is to show how God's people, by the sacrifice of the perfect high priest, will be ushered in. And of course, Jesus, when he dies on the cross, immediately the veil in the temple, the veil that had cherubs, and the only place we meet cherubs is keeping people out of the Garden of Eden. The veil is torn in two. The way to the Holy of Holies is open. It's interesting to me that, remember how we said Lake Lekah, go for yourself. It's interesting that Lake Lekah is repeated in the story of God asking Abraham. Now his name's been changed, perhaps signifying this new covenant work, that God is changing who he is and giving him a heart. Abraham's living by faith. Genesis 15, Abraham believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. And we see that faith working itself out in love, where when God says to him, please take your son, that's going to be for another video, but nearly everyone leaves out the please, but the ancient rabbis all comment on it. Why does God say please? Why does he moderate the command into a command with the word please with it? But we'll look at that another day. But God says, go for yourself. And if the original Lekha to the land I will show you, is God showing Abraham a land that will require a sacrifice of an only son. And so this idea of the land I will show you, is it a huge land? Is it a land that requires sacrifice, and sacrifice of even a son? And perhaps God is giving Abraham, helping him see not just with his eyes, but to see spiritually and to feel what it's like to come back to this glorious place once given. When we come to 46:4, and it's 46:5 in Hebrew, but there is a river, same word as the Eden, whose streams, well, Eden's river has a stream, makes glad, delights the city of God. And if you know anything about the geography of Jerusalem, there is no river in Jerusalem. There's a little stream, the Gihon, which is the main source of water any direction for 5 miles. It's brought into Jerusalem by Hezekiah's tunnel, but there is no river. But David, being inspired, is saying there is a river. There is a river that delights the city of God. And so are we seeing more texts that are telling us about this Eden's river to be restored? If we go, I think it's Joel 2, Joel describes a river also, and it's oddly similar to, I should have had this written down before, but it's oddly similar to Eden's river because it flows in two directions. Let me see if I can find it here. Have the whole new Exodus thing there with the glory of God. And I should have looked this up before I did this. But it talks about a splitting river that flows to Abel Shittim, and it splits up east and west, and you think, oh, well, that's kind of similar to the description of Eden's river. It doesn't look like I can find. Oh, here it is. So I guess it's 3:18. In that day, the mountains will drip with sweet wine, and the hills will flow with milk. The stream beds will flow with water, and a fountain. So this is the key part. A fountain from the house of God. Look at that. Same word, is going out. And is this the same word as well? It looks very similar. It is. So this word is the same as Eden's description. And I believe this one is the same word as well. And so you have this idea that a river will go to Abel Shittim. Well, the problem with that is Abel Shittim is on the other side of the Jordan River, so something geographically massive is going to happen, and somehow this river coming from Jerusalem is headed in the eastward direction. Well, we've been looking for a river like that, have we not? And then we might look quickly at, I think it's Zechariah 12, also talking about a river flowing. This is in the middle of the eschatological mercy of God. They will look on me whom they've pierced. That sounds oddly like what happened to Jesus. On that day 13, there will be a fountain open for the house of David, for the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and it will talk about how that flows, maybe in 14. But you get the idea that there, Psalm 46, Joel 3, this passage in Zechariah, all talking about rivers in Jerusalem. And then if we just look at one more in the Old Testament, we have Ezekiel 47, which similarly affirms that a river will flow, and it's some kind of massively exponentially growing river in the space of about 2 miles. It goes from a small trickle to a rushing stream, and we're told that special trees are on the banks and the leaves are for the healing of the nations. And if I had time, there's actually a textual variant in the manuscripts that talk about the rivers, plural, and the dual river, I think one of the textual variants says. And so you have this idea of a river that's splitting. And of course, that description is picked up in the description of the new heaven and the new earth, where you've got this city that looks like a Holy of Holies, but it's almost 1,400 miles cubed. And in the middle of that, when it describes this massive New Jerusalem, this place that's restored, it tells us in the very last chapter that the river of life was there. Well, we've been looking for a river. Where is that river? And Revelation 22 tells us in Jerusalem. And the description of that river is the description of the tree in Ezekiel. And notice that John adds that, by the way, it is the tree of life. From there went out the tree of life, making 12 fruits. And the idea, the whole Bible may be answering the question, where is the Garden of Eden? Be interested in your thoughts. How you may have a suggestion as well. How does your suggestion fit in with the other text in terms of biblical theology? If Eden and Jerusalem are somehow connected, well, then you get this eschatological meta-narratival plot symmetrical elegance, where near the place where the first sin happened was the place where the temple was built, the place where God had instructed Abraham to offer a son, an only son whom he loved, son who would carry the wood on which he was to die up a hill, father bitterly grieving over what would happen. And what if God intended all of those details to come together and wanted us to know that there was a bitterness there, a Moriah, but God chose to love Abraham, and then Abraham's seed, and all those, both ethnic Jew and ethnic Gentile, who come in helpless reliance on God, the same way Abel came, and God receives them by mercy. If Eden and Jerusalem are connected, then all of that's happening at the same place. It's very interesting that the Jewish painter Marc Chagall has a painting called the Akedah, and it's interesting how much of the connection between Christ's sacrifice, Eve's fallenness, two powers in heaven, the whole one commanding and the other stopping. It's amazing how much he puts in that painting, very wonderful painting. But I would be interested in your ideas. How does your suggestion for the Garden of Eden relate to other texts, and how does your explanation deal with the details? Look forward to your comments, and I will talk to you next time.